Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG tabletop video. In this video, I'm going to be playing some Dragapult Dusknoir. This deck, of course, got a huge boost from Bidoof and the kind of meta developments that came along with the Bidoof. So I'm going to be playing it at League, get some experience with it. I've got a Lost Vacuum in the list. I think that's a super smart inclusion, especially if Gardevoir is going to be playing Hero's Cape and Miraidon is going to be playing Bravery Charm. Those tools are pretty annoying and really ruin a lot of the math you're trying to set up. Otherwise, pretty standard list. I got 3 Lance in there as well. I rate that card really highly. Just good to get out all your Dracloaks, especially under Bidoof when your opponent's not really doing anything. You can kind of take the time to just play a Lance. As well, the 3 Duskull, super strong. A lot of matchups, I find my opponents just like spam killing my Duskulls, and it's really annoying. So we got 3 of them, but other than that, we can just get right into round 1. So in round 1, we're up against Miraidon. I mean, they start Latias, but they got the Miraidon sleeves. Surely we're about to get amped on turn 1. My start is pretty abysmal. I have 1 Ultra Ball. I debate getting Dreepy and just like hoping I top deck. I think I would have needed to top deck like Rare Candy or an Iono into like some crazy combo. Or I think I needed to top deck Arven maybe, and like I could have attacked with Dragapult on turn 2. And I debated if that was worth it, because like when he amps my Duskull here, like, am I really able to win the game? But I thought the answer was yes. I thought, if he amps the Duskull, maybe next turn we can play an Iono. We can bench some Dreepies. Maybe he doesn't have a boss, right? Maybe he's got an Arm Press or Rotom, and then we can kind of come back into the game. Or maybe he just whiffs the turn 1 attack. All of his generators whiff, and we just get back in the game. But that's not going to be the case. Of course, he's already ripping the generator. He's got 2 energies in play. Lots of turn left to play. He's got the Squawk ability. Still hasn't played a supporter. We haven't seen the secret box, so lots of options here. My opponent actually opts here not to get the secret box. I think this is a little bit of a mistake, unless his hand is like completely undiscardable. Usually it's a good idea to just get the box on turn 1, thin out some extra cards, and just boost those generator odds. But he ends up double hitting the generator anyways, and then here's that turn 1 amp. So, like I mentioned before, we're pretty much just going to play an Iono here and hope that he's not able to continue taking knockouts. It's going to be really easy for him, but if luck has not gone our way up until now, maybe we can get a little swing of luck. Our opponent can draw some terrible cards, and we can come back into the game. We go ahead, Ultra Ball for the Dreepy, Vessel for some energies. Really just wanting to play this Vessel to thin out our deck, not draw energies off the Iono. We're going to need a couple basics at the very least, and probably a pretty good hand if we want to attack with Dragapult next turn. I put the Crystal down on the Dreepy. A little bit of a risk. Of course, if our opponent kills that Dreepy, we're not playing Crispin, and we will be set back to the Stone Age, and we will not be attacking for many turns. But I figure it's worth the risk. We are very far behind, and as a general rule of thumb, when you are behind, you want to take risks to come back into the game, right? If my opponent whiffs this turn, attaching this crystal just makes it way more likely that I can actually candy a Dragapult and get back to kind of the standard tempo that you want to be on in this matchup. And that's what happens. My opponent draws some terrible cards off this Iono, attaches an energy to Miraidon, and just smacks into the Rotom for 160. Now at this point, the game is kind of back to being fair, right? I did nothing for a turn. My opponent's done nothing for a turn. And now we're able to kind of maneuver. A couple things we have going for us. My opponent's got a Squawk ability down. And he also doesn't have any of his draw support Pokemon, the Mew, the Fez. I guess the Raikou, if you count that. I mean, it draws a card. It kind of counts. And so his options are going to be very limited. But I kind of tunnel vision here on the fact that my opponent obviously has a really terrible hand. Yes, he has a terrible hand, but he could top deck out of it at any point. And so here I get the Ultra Ball and the Seal Stone. The idea being, I think I Seal Stone for Dusclops here. And then the idea is that next turn, if my opponent does nothing again, I can just blow up this Dusknoir onto the Squawk and then make some kind of like 6-prize Phantom Dive play. But I think this is just like needlessly risky. If my opponent top decks Ultra Ball or Generator or Arven, that's going to be everything he needs to just blow up my only Dragapult, remove all my energies, and I will not be Phantom Diving next turn. So I think instead of Arvening for like Sealstone Ultra Ball to prep this Dusknoir play, I should have just gotten energy, whether I Sealstone for the energy Actually, I would have had to Sealstone for the energy, or I could have Arven for Night Stretcher to get back the Psychic energy. That also could have been okay, but I just needed to start preparing a second Dragapult here because my opponent top decks the Ultra Ball. That's going to get him the Magneton, and my Dragapult is going to get completely blown up. Additionally, my opponent has two energies on the Miraidon there. They're hard to see, but they're there, and so he's going to be able to store some extra energies in play to potentially get a knockout onto Rotom next turn. Now, we do have a couple options available to us. We still do have Dusclops. We can potentially use Jet Headbutt. That means we can maybe remove some energies from play. An Iono would be really good. We still have the Sealstone up, so although we now can't win the game with like some cool Phantom Dive play, we can do some things. And especially when my opponent keeps these energies on the Iron Hands, I think there are definitely ideas of just blowing up Dusclops onto the Iron Hands, knock it out, remove all of my opponent's energy from play, and then we're setting him back to the Stone Age as well, which is a little bit nice. But unfortunately, I think I get greedy again. Like, I'm really tunneling onto this like cool like 6-prize Phantom Dive play. I've seen people do it, and I really wanted to just do it myself in a tournament. I've done it online, but I just saw an opportunity to make this cool 6-prize Dusknoir play, and I was just committed to it. So I end up not popping the Dusclops onto this Iron Hands. And what I end up doing instead, I Arven. I think I had to get Night Stretcher there because my last Dragapult is prized. I wanted to Ultra Ball, or I want to Arven for Ultra Ball here, and get Dragapult, but I have to get Night Stretcher, which is a little awkward. I think I had the Ultra Ball in hand. But anyways, we end up getting back the Dragapult. We attach the energy. And here I'm like debating using Jet Headbutt, but I think the 3 cards from Instant Charge are more important. I bench the Alakazam, move the damage to the hands. That way next turn, I can draw 2 cards, essentially. I can move damage from the Squawk to the hands again, draw 2 prizes, because I need Psychic Energy to be able to Phantom Dive next turn. And I think I might also need Counter Catcher, depending on what my opponent leaves in the active. I also bench the Badoo, just why not? We already have this Rotom, which is a massive liability. And so essentially here, we're just hoping our opponent doesn't have a Lightning Energy and a Boss. He's got maybe a 4 or 5 card hand, but I figured his hand hasn't been so strong until now, so maybe his hand just continues to be kind of weak. Without Mew-EX, Pheasantipede, and Raikou, Miraidon does tend to run out of steam sometimes, and you can kind of see based on my opponent's pace here that he doesn't have much going on. So basically, what ends up happening here is he kind of just ends up passing over the turn, and then I just have a Psychic Energy to Phantom Dive for 4, and then I blow up the Dusknoir onto the Squawk, make a cool 6-prize play, and we win the game. So I think I could have played this one a little better, but we end up kind of getting away with this one. Getting into round 2, we run into actually a really, really cool deck. One I've lost to on the Pokemon Live ladder, actually a few times, which is a little upsetting. But anyways, I got it on the screen there. If you don't know what Slowking does, you can discard the top card of your deck, and then if it's a Pokemon, you copy the attack. So essentially, this deck plays Regigigas and Kyurem. I'm sure there's maybe some other options, but mostly Regigigas and Kyurem is what it's going to be looking to copy. And it can do it for just 2 energies. So pretty low maintenance. It uses the Academy at Night Stadium to basically stack their deck, get the Pokemon on top. And so that's really scary. I don't play Manaphy, so I'm very vulnerable to Kyurem. And of course, Regigigas one-shots my Dragapult. So I think this is a bad matchup, but when my opponent starts Regigigas, it's a huge break for me. That thing has like a 4 retreat cost, and my opponent also has a fairly weak setup, doesn't get down any Slowpokes, and so I just go into the Badoo, and I assume this is going to buy me a lot of time when I do it, and I think I kind of assume correctly here. My opponent plays a Research, not going to be able to play any Nest Balls, any Ultra Balls, any Earthen Vessels. I'm not entirely sure what items are in my opponent's deck, but he can't play any Switch as well, which at the time, I thought he might play Switch, but there's actually, I think, 3 or 4 Jet Energies in his deck, so that kind of does give him an out to get out of this Gigas whenever he needs. But off to a pretty solid start here. I get down some Bros and I play Iono. Now, something interesting here, I had an Iono in my hand before Iono, like a second one, and I debated using Academy at Night to put it on top of my deck. But I decided not to. I was like, I can draw better cards than Iono. I want to draw Dracloaks. And then I Iono'd into like the worst 6 cards I've ever seen in my life. So I kind of regretted not putting the Iono back on top there, but my opponent just goes ahead and Ionos me back, which is a breath of life for me. And then he's getting set up here. He's got the double Slowpoke. He's got the Xatu going, and he's putting on a little bit of pressure. I am a little bit afraid that my opponent is going to somehow cure me at this point. I didn't put together the pieces on Jet Energy, but I was like, oh, like maybe he plays Penny, or maybe there's like a Latias or something, or I don't know. I wasn't really sure what was happening against the Slowking deck, so I am definitely afraid of just like getting my board wiped on the next turn. So in this spot, I could have continued using Badoo. I was like, oh, maybe this Badoo just like buys me infinite time. I also considered the possibility that like my opponent just doesn't actually play any switch cards that aren't items. Like maybe he's just on like 2 switches or 2 switch cards or something. In which case, like I could just sit here forever, set up like the most OP board of all time, and then decide to start attacking. But I ended up getting a little spooked here, so I go ahead and I Ultra Ball for Lumineon. That's going to get me a big play here. I'm going to be able to kill both the Slowpoke, Sealstone, Countercatcher. Of course, we're going to Dusclops one, and then we're going to kill the other. So I also felt like this play was just so good that even though like my board isn't great, it's like probably good enough, right? We got 1 Dracloak. That'll help us draw some cards. And we should just be able to establish a large enough lead here. No need to get greedy and like Badoo for another turn to like, I don't know, try to set up more Dracloaks or something. I guess it would have maybe helped me not bench this Lumineon and not use my Sealstone, but it seemed like a pretty good use. At this point, my opponent actually top decks Max Rod. That's his ace spec, or maybe he didn't top deck it there, but Max Rod, I think that's what it's called at least, is his ace spec of choice, and actually looks pretty good here. It's going to let him recover double Slowpoke, Psychic Energy, and I guess those are some Slowkings. I'm not really sure what else he recovers, but definitely double Slowpoke and the Energy. Pretty huge for him to pick up here. And I guess he's also going to pick up the Kyurem just so that he can potentially put it on top of his deck next turn with the Academy and take a big multi-KO on my bench. Now at this point, I think I'm also sitting on boss's orders, so all I need is a Dusclops, and then I can Dusclops the Slowpoke's boss and double kill them again, which just is so oppressive. This Dragapult deck really does check these like kind of cool evolution decks sometimes. Like this one specifically has a lot of options, like when it sets up with the Gigas and the Kyurem, but you know, a lot of these decks, you know, I've seen it with Gardevoir as well. Of course, Charizard, a victim, right? These evolution decks with frail basics just getting bullied by Phantom Dive. It's a common story. So, of course, why Dragapult is one of the best decks in the game, and we're gonna see some toxic behavior on my next turn here. I think I Dracloak into the Duskull. I immediately grab it, and now I'm just drawing some more cards. I got the boss in hand already, and we're gonna double kill these Slowpokes. So a little unfortunate for my opponent here. His really cool Slowking deck just didn't really get off the ground, and at this point from here, I don't know, I double kill these Slowpokes. He can't attack, and then I think I just take out the Squawkabilly next turn or something, or maybe I like double kill the Xatu, but either way, this game is pretty much over, and we're going to go ahead and get into round 3 here. In round 3, I run into a pretty cool deck, a deck we haven't really seen much of lately, Roaring Moon. And I go first, which is because I lost the flip, and then I get a couple of basics down, and it's off to my opponent. Now, if my opponent's able to attack on turn 1, we're going to be under a lot of pressure. I don't think it's really realistic to be rare candying a Dragapult next turn, and specifically in this game, my hand is, I think it's like okay. I saw Lance. I think I might have like an Arven and Iono, but I definitely don't have like Candy Pult, Crystal, Energy Attack, something like that. That's just not happening. So I think this matchup overall is good, right? If they want to one-shot our Dragapults, they're going to have to put 200 damage on themselves, which is, I mean, pretty bad for them, right? Just basically self-KOing themselves. We can pick that knockout, out later with a Phantom Dive sniping on the bench. Like maybe, you know, they do 200 to ourselves, and then we can just like Phantom Dive Squawk plus trickle some damage onto the Roaring Moon. One thing to think about is Ancient Booster Capsule. I'm not sure exactly how many booster capsules are in my opponent's deck, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of them based on what we see this game. There's already 2 in their hand, and then they just go ahead play a bunch of cards, get a bunch of energies in play. They got a Pokemon catcher on our Dreepy as well, which is really annoying. Of course, we have Lance in hand, so that's one less Dracloak we're going to have on our next turn. And then they just go ahead and take the knockout here. Now, onto my turn, I'm already kind of committing to the fact that I'm not going to attack with Dragapult this turn. And I think I decided to Nest Ball for Fez here, which is maybe a mistake. Like, maybe I'm just supposed to Lance for, like, some Dreepies, because, of course, this Fez can get knocked out by the Calamity Storm attack, right? And then our opponent doesn't have to put 200 damage on their Roaring Moon. I think I felt like my hand was so lackluster that Lance for, like, Dracloak, Dreepy, for example, just wasn't going to be good enough. And so I end up going for the Fez here. I decided to actually get Dragapult EX because if my opponent knocks out, well, either way, I'm going to want a Dragapult next turn. But if my opponent knocks out my only Dracloak this turn, I'm going to need to like rare candy into Dragapult, which is bad. And so I get the Dragapult now so I can start looking for the rare candy. Additionally, I thought that benching this Fez is a good idea because I might get multiple uses from it. Like my opponent might just decide to kill Dracloak. Or like maybe they kill the Fez and I actually kind of need them to kill the Fez so that I can have the Dracloak and like have some long-term draw power. So I felt like I needed some threat diversification. My opponent's deck is just really good at targeting down with Pokemon Catcher, Boss's Orders. And I continue with this idea. I evolve the active into Dusclops. I put the energy on the Dreepy. So this way I have like 4 different things. Instead of having like a Dracloak with an energy and no Fez, and like I'm just devastated when my opponent kills the Dracloak here, I decided to go wide and put my opponent in a spot where maybe they don't know what to knock out. At this point, my opponent's got like a 14 card hand. I think I mulliganed twice actually before the game as well, so I think that's kind of where some of these cards, or no, they squawked as well, so they did a hand reset, but from what I remember, I did mulligan twice this game. And then my opponent's just going to end up deciding to KO this Dusclops after putting down the Fez. That Fez is great for them. It helps give them some stability, right? If I Iono, they're just going to be able to draw some more cards. Additionally, they got 3 energies on their bench, Roaring Moon EX. Now, we see the Ancient Booster Capsules in their hand. I'm not sure why they didn't want to commit the capsules because I think an Iono here is super punishing. Look at my opponent shuffling their hand. That's just like an unbelievable amount of cards. And I end up in a point here where I have Arven, and so I could Arven to get Sparkling Crystal and attack, and I have Counter Catcher, so I could like hit the moon for 200 or like Phantom Dive, put some damage on it. But the problem in my eyes was that the second I use my Crystal, if my opponent just like one-shots my Dragapult with the Crystal, I don't play Crispin, and so then for the rest of the game, I basically just have to Jet Headbutt, which sounded terrible. And so instead of Arvening for the Crystal here, I end up opting to play Iono. I also like wanted to get rid of my opponent's 12 card hand because like they can probably just like kill Fez and like not actually damage themselves. And I thought that was a bad spot. I'm not entirely sure if this was the correct idea. I was pretty inexperienced against this Roaring Moon deck, but I think maybe just Arvening for Crystal would be good there. I think also there's a chance that my opponent doesn't recognize that I like just don't play Crispin. And so maybe they're like, oh, I don't want to damage my Roaring Moon. Maybe they Counter Catcher, kill the Fez with Calamity Storm. And then there's some opportunities for me to like blow up Dusknors and make some big plays from there. But then again, if I leave my opponent with a 12 card hand, they had multiple booster capsules in hand, and we could potentially just get blown out by like a bunch of booster capsules coming onto the board, buffing the HP of these Pokemon, maybe like a switch card or something to remove some damage. Maybe they just decide to like one-shot my active anyways, and then I just like lose the game. So that's probably the turn in this game where I had the biggest decision, and I decided to Iono here. I felt like if my opponent also just like draws kind of bad here and just has to use gouging, right, then we can kind of take over the game, right? We can continue to Iono. We can set up more Pults. Like imagine they just like gouge my guy with energy. Then next turn we can like blow up Clops onto maybe the bench moon. Get our Crystal involved, and then maybe take like a 4 prize play, take out all the Roaring Moons, play an Iono, and Iono them to 1. Like, okay, that just sounds so good. Like, how could that ever be bad, right? But that's not what ends up happening here. They end up getting very set up. They get the double capsule down. They play Judge, and then they're going to go ahead and KO my Pheasantipede. And at this point, I feel like almost checkmated. If I kill... okay, now like any kind of double kill play is just out of the question, right? Because they didn't do 200 to themselves. So um, also the Dusclops Countercatcher Kill the Other Moon play is not available because it also has a capsule. These 300 HP Pokemon are just a nightmare for me to KO. And so I feel like my best play here is to just like knock out the active. Also, I have to pop a Dusclops onto the active if I want to get the KO. And so I sit here for a long time, and I don't know. When your opponent sits here like this, guys, it's just a sign that their hand's terrible and they're screwed. I'm sitting here, I'm trying to think of something, and I just kind of have nothing. I end up, I don't even know what I'm arguing for here, but I end up just like blowing up Dusclops onto the active and knocking it out. And then my opponent just like uses Fez and attaches 2 energies to the bench moon, whether it's like Sada's, Dark Patch, attach for turn, whatever, and they just blow up another Dragapult to close out the game here. So maybe on that big turn, I was supposed to play Arven and just use the crystal, because like at this point, I never even get any value from it. So maybe the play was use the crystal on that other turn, hope my opponent just like decides not to gouge my Dragapult. Maybe they just kill the Fez after I put my crystal down, and then maybe we could have won, but not entirely sure. Definitely an interesting game here. Getting into round 4, we run into a Regidrago. Now, in my testing, I honestly have not been playing very many games with or against Regidrago, so every time I play against it at League, I'm kind of figuring it out as I go. But I know Badoo is a good card here, and so I go ahead, I poffin down the Badoo. I have to vacuum away the Lance, which is a bit of a bummer. We'd love to just like play Lance here, but I don't have a way to retreat into the Badoo, so I gotta opt for the Iono here. Give my opponent a fresh hand of 6, and we end up finding the energy to retreat. That's great. It's also great that we had the vacuum for that jamming tower. Of course, it's in the lost zone now, it can't come back, and our sparkling crystal should be able to get some value at some point in the game. As I'm playing this Poffin, I consider the fact that maybe I'm not supposed to play a super wide board. That way, like if I get Kyuremed, it's less bad. Also, I like don't get down a Duskull here, which I think is just terrible. Yes, like putting down the Duskull makes you weak to Phantom Dive, but not having Duskull just makes it really hard for me to actually do anything. Like I'm going to Badoo for a long time, and then like if my opponent just continues to do nothing, how do I actually initiate, right? Like I just have to Phantom Dive? That doesn't sound particularly good. So I think I need to get a Duskull down. That way I can initiate by like pop a Dusclops on the Regidrago, countercatcher it up, and Phantom Dive, right? That's a lot more feasible. But here I'm actually like kind of awkwardly stuck until my opponent decides to knock something out. So we're going to continue with our setup. Get down a couple Dracloaks. I discard the rare candy. That's a good card, right? So in a spot like this, if you were my opponent, you see me Ultra Ball away a rare candy. My other cards are probably pretty good. I think I have 2 or 3. And I imagine, okay, it looked like I had a rescue board and probably like a Dragapult in my hand and maybe like a supporter. I'm not entirely sure, but I go ahead, I go back into the Badoo. My opponent gets the Motivate off, and now this Regidrago V is getting a little bit threatening. It could come up soon and take a KO. And now at this point, like in order for me to initiate, my plan now is to literally sit here until I draw Penny or Turo, sorry. I have to Turo something, put down Radiant Alakazam. No, like that didn't even work. I have no idea what my plan to actually initiate was. I think eventually I'm just waiting until I draw into boss's orders, I suppose. And then when I draw into boss, I can bring up the Drago. Or like I guess I could just like Phantom Dive the Squawk, and like that's okay, but I didn't love that. Like I Phantom Dive the Squawk and then I just get Kyuremed and like Iono'd. I don't know, that doesn't sound good, but my opponent goes ahead and knocks out the Badoo, which gives me a little bit of life in the game. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say it like that. I'm definitely in a good position. It's just a little awkward for me to actually get attacking here. So now I get the Alakazam out, and this is going to let me potentially KO this Regidrago V. I think I definitely have the counter catcher and the crystal in my hand, and yeah, it's going to be great for me. But also here, like, it could be awkward for me to continue in this game because now I'm like awkwardly bench locked out of Duskull again, and it'd be really nice for me to potentially next turn just like, I don't know, blow up a Dusknoir onto a Drago, maybe move some damage onto, maybe that's not really an idea, but I don't know. Just, I should have had some Duskulls on my board. I was just deciding to play Quad Dragapult for some reason. My opponent goes ahead, gets a couple guys set up, gets the Fez, gets the Drago going. I imagined they're just going to end this turn with a Motivate, right? Get some energies onto the Drago. and that's what they go ahead and do. And so here I kind of need to find boss's orders, right? If I have boss, I can boss up that Regidrago V, knock it out, spread some damage to the bench, and it's just good times. I think from what I remember, I do have the boss's orders here, so a little lucky. I think there's only one boss's orders in my deck, and my deck is pretty thick, so I definitely don't have this boss's orders all the time. And then we just go ahead, we take the knockout. Also, we decide to attach an energy to the Alakazam. I think it's really easy, and I was tempted to just like put the energy on my Dragapult, and I'm like, yippee, then I have 2 attackers, but I feel like at this point, the only way we lose the game is our Alakazam getting trapped for like a million turns, and we get Iono'd, and then my opponent like makes a cool board and like Kyurems me. I wasn't really entirely sure, but I felt like it definitely started with my Alakazam getting trapped here, but my opponent doesn't have too much here. Just going to go in with the Radzard. And then I think there's enough built up damage on that Squawk for me to go ahead and close out the game. So Badoo kind of carrying me here, even though I definitely made some tactical mistakes in the early game. Definitely should have had a Duskull on my board. But now next time I know to put down a Duskull, even though Phantom Dive is a threat. Without the Duskull, we just don't really have a good way to threaten much of anything. So we need that Duskull. Anyways, that'll be it for this round. In round 5, we run into another Regidrago, so I have a bit of a chance to redeem myself. I think this is probably my favorite game of the video. It gets pretty interesting, and I think I actually play this one pretty well. So my opponent got 2 energies down turn 1. They start the Cleffa, so it looks pretty good. I don't think they have a Dragon Pokemon in the discard, which is another key piece of the puzzle. So we go ahead, we get a couple Dreepies down, and this time there's the Duskull. We're just going to go ahead and get it down. If our opponent continues to do nothing for a while, we need a way to apply some pressure, and the way to do that is going to be blowing up a Duskull onto that Regidrago. We also got an energy attachment, so pretty much an ideal turn from us. Honestly, really happy with that. And my opponent gets a research. He's going to get Tina in the discard, so he's got a dragon now, but that's probably the worst one. Gudra, maybe next, but like definitely he wanted to have a Pult in the discard. Honestly, even just like having Regidrago V in the discard could be kind of cool. That way he can copy its attack with the V-Star, get some extra HP here. But my opponent's hand, presumably clogged with some items. Actually, I can't even tell if there is items in there. It doesn't look like it. Just a lot of supporters and Pokemon and energy. So a little awkward for him there. But there's not going to be a lot of hands that aren't awkward under Badoo. Onto my turn. Like, guys, tell me this Lance card isn't just completely broken. I get 3 Recon Directives. This just seems insane. I'm allowed to kind of play the slower approach under Badoo because the game's going to go slower. And here we just get, I don't know, 3 good cards into our hand, whatever they were. And then I think we're just going to go ahead and Badoo again. I'm not sure if we have any other actions. We have another Duskull in our hand. I don't think we need multiple Duskulls. I think that's opening ourselves up a little bit too much. And then we just go ahead and Badoo. And we're pretty much hoping that my opponent doesn't have Research plus Kyurem here. I think if he has Research plus Kyurem and then a V-Star, I get like kind of blown out. Just like all my guys get blown off the board. But what he does have is Dragon Laser Boss. So he takes 2 prizes here. And at this point, I see an opportunity to basically just make my board like, it's almost like I'm playing Arch Duraludon. I'm just going to go evolve into 2 Dragapults. I'll have Drake. My opponent's on 4 prizes. So I'll have a Dracloak for a little bit of draw support. He'll never really be motivated to knock out this Dracloak because it'll put him on 3 prizes. So it just doesn't really do anything for his prize map, which is really nice for me because then I just get to keep my draw support. And then the plan is just to never bench another Pokemon until it's like Lumineon to win the game. And then as far as my prize map goes from here, I'm pretty much just going to try to set up for a 6 prize turn with 3 Phantom Dives. So what I'm thinking is like this turn, we Phantom Dive, we put 200 on this Drago, we put 10 on an Ogerpon. Next turn, we bring up another Ogerpon, we smack it for 200, we trickle some damage onto the board, and then on the last turn, we just like use another boss and Phantom Dive for 6. And then, I mean, you guys have heard me talk about this when I played Regidrago constantly, where by doing that, we're playing around Iono, so we're sort of still drawing 6, we're playing around Fez, we're keeping access to Countercatcher. All of these comeback effects just work in our favor the whole game when we're able to just set up our damage like so. Now, the one thing I was kind of relying on for this strat was that this active Regidrago V, it needs to evolve into a V-Star for me because as long as it's a V, I kind of like need to kill it. If I don't kill it, it can evolve at any point and put itself out of Phantom Dive range. So I was really hoping this Drago V-Star would evolve and I could trickle, like, honestly, just 6 more damage counters onto it. If the Drago V on the bench evolves, which is what's going to happen here, and my opponent just actually attacks with the other Regidrago, it kind of ruins my 6 prize play because if I don't put damage on this heavily damaged Regidrago V and it evolves, then my 6 prize play is blocked. So a little awkward for me. Kind of ruins my devious plan here. I think I just have to like kill the Regidrago V because of that. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. My opponent's having a good turn here. He's getting out the Regidrago V-Star. He pops the bundle mostly just to free up the bench space, I presume. I don't think he has any interest in killing this Dracloak and then facing down 2 full HP Dragapults that he can't really one-shot. And so we see the Prime Catcher and a Poppy, a little bit of anti-Badoo technology in my opponent's deck. He's also got the Crispin. We were talking about it today, so that's kind of funny. And then he just goes ahead and lost impacts. I think that's probably like his only attacker, but I also think it's maybe his best attacker here. He's threatening now to like Phantom Dive and like set up the other Dragapult to be knocked out. And well, I guess he could have just like Phantom Dive twice. I don't know. This is like fine for him. We go ahead, we Vessel, we get the energies out. We've now got 2 Dragapults fully powered up, ready to go. I've got Counter Catcher here. I bring up the Ogre Pawn. And like I mentioned before, because this Drago V didn't evolve, it kind of foils our 6 prize plan potential. So we're just going to go ahead, smack this Ogre Pawn for 200, and then we're actually going to knock out that Regidrago V on the bench. And then with our extra counters, we're just going to trickle them onto the V-Star. Now, this is nice because if that V-Star comes up into the active, I have like the easiest 4 prize Phantom Dive ever. If my opponent Goodras, it's just kind of a terrible attack because then if he Goodras, he can't one-shot my Dragapult to win on the next turn. So like he needs to Phantom Dive here if he wants to win next turn. But now he can't Phantom Dive because he's got 90 damage on his Regidrago V-Star. And so he's just kind of in an awful position. So this time, even though he was able to get out of the Badoo with the Dragon Laser, even if it was like a Phantom Dive, he would have ended up in the same position. So you don't need to actually like full brick your Regidrago opponent. You just need to slow them down enough so they don't just completely wipe your board with a Kyurem play. And then Dragapult EXs are actually pretty annoying for them to deal with. They've also got a lot of these like frail Pokemon, like you see me setting up 200 on these Ogre Pawns. I think if there was 3 of them, my life would have been even easier setting up for like some kind of cool 6 prize play. But you can see my opponent here doing the classic, like slowing down because he's got nothing here. I think he eventually just like goes into Cleffa or something, or maybe he passes with this Ogre Pawn in the active to try to block my 4 prize Phantom Dive play. But he's really just got no win condition in my opinion. Like eventually I'm just gonna like win the game. I've got Dracloak, so I'm gonna be drawing cards. I guess in order for him to win the game, he would have to like, oh, maybe he could like smack with Radzard. No, because if he does that, I just kill Radzard, Cleffa, and Ogre Pawn. So he would have to like set up another full HP Regidrag. I don't even know. I think he's just cooked, to be honest. So yeah, he goes ahead, he Cleffas, and then I'm actually just gonna win the game on the next turn. I start my turn. I have a Buddy Poffin. I remember he Iono'd a lot of my outs to the bottom. I think I had like an Ultra Ball, maybe a Luminion. I don't really remember, but I just need boss here, and I definitely had some outs to boss on the bottom of my deck. I can't Counter Catcher here because I had to kill that Regidrago V, but we just got Ultra Ball here. Oh, we got Rotom Sealstone actually, and then that's going to let us go ahead, grab the boss's orders, and close it out. So interesting league. This last game gave me some fond memories of Regidrago. Felt like I was playing Regidrago this game, but that's going to be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next one.